First, I have to say thank you for the President Tsai and former President Chen, and our very distinguished guests from abroad and domestic. And this session is quite nervous because we have a lot of discussions here. And first, we have three presenters from the Open University, and they presented their introduction or some perspective about these topics. Our topic is about the public value and their practice in Taiwan. I suppose it's not just in Taiwan because we have a lot of friends from abroad. So maybe public value is just, and the practice not just in the experience and the system, maybe just in Taiwan, so maybe include a lot of countries. Due to the time limits, so I have to have some word about we divide this kind of session into three parts. The first is our three presenters have some presentation, and then we proceed to the discussions presentation, and then open to the floor and welcome anybody to raise your hand, your comment, or your question, or even in Chinese, it's okay, because today is quite available for speaking and something, okay. And first we welcome Professor Xu Liyi and Huang Zhidong, Liao Zhou-Peng. Three professors will have 10 minutes to present their speaking. And then every discussion just have 3 minutes, please. Sorry, 6 minutes, 6 minutes, sorry. So not allowed to speak too long, something like that. So just time limit, so I'm very sorry about that. So first, please, Professor Xu, okay, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, and it is our greatest pleasure to be here and to have you come to this conference. And my name is Zhidong Huang, and most English speakers know me as Morgan. And I am assistant professor in the Department of Public Administration in National Open University. So today's topic is about the public values and their practices in Taiwan. Today's talk, we are going to divide this talk into 3 different parts. The first part is about the history of the policy of the so-called the Golden Decade. And the second part is about the 5 pillars in this Golden Decade policy, and will be delivered by Professor Zhou-Peng Liao here. And finally, our director of department will give us some challenges on this issue, Professor Li Yixu here. So, what is the Golden Decade? The term Golden Decade has firstly announced by President Ma after Taiwan and his Ma administration signed a historical free trade agreement, also known as ECFA, with the mainland Chinese. And after then, and since then, the Golden Decade has become the very foundation of Ma's administration. So, but as you can see, it's about the free trade agreement. So it has nothing to do in the beginning with the public values. It's a purely economic, and its title has nothing to do with the public values. However, as time goes by, the meaning of it has changed and developed. So in 2011, after President Ma outlined his visions to achieve social justice and a cleaner government in Taiwan as part of the Golden Decade plan, and since then, he was re-elected in this year in January, and then Ma further specified his pledge into his second inaugural speech. So now I finished the historical part of the the Golden Decade. Now I give my hand to Professor Liao and to give some 5 pillars. Okay.
I will introduce the contents of the Golden Decade. There are 5 pillars to make Taiwan competitive. The first pillar is enhancing the drivers of economic growth. Because the further economic liberalization improvements to Taiwan's industrial structure, there are 2 policies. The first one is making Taiwan a free trade island. The second is turning the old efficiency-driven production model to a new innovation-driven and value-creating industrial model. And the second pillar main theme is creating employment and realizing social justice. Because market liberalization and globalization may cause a huge gap between rich and the poor. So the government provides 2 policies. First one is sound fiscal structure, especially focus on the tax justice. And the second one is forward-looking population policy, focusing on aging population and the low birth rate. And the third one is a just judiciary. The third pillar is developing an environment characterized by low carbon emissions and high reliance on green energy. The policy focuses on turning Taiwan into a low carbon green energy island. So they search for reasonable energy prices, which make market-based prices and the user-pays principle. And the second policy is creating impetus for energy conservation, carbon reduction, and increased investment in green energy industries. The fourth pillar is about building culture as source of national strength. Because Taiwan has 3 cultural traits. The first one is civic spirit, is deep-rooted. And the second, traditional culture is well preserved. And the third, the links and the transactions between tradition and the modernity are sophisticated. So the policies is focused on forming a cultural industry that plays an important role in the Chinese-speaking world. The fifth pillar, the last one. The fifth pillar main thing is taking active steps to cultivate, recruit, and retain talent. Since Taiwan lacks natural resources, talent is our most important resource and the key to national development. So the government provides 2 policies. The first one is turning universities into cradles of local talent, because the government believes when they build it, and then they will come. So they try to build a nest to attract the foreigners. So the third part, we will let the director Shiouh to introduce our landing some questions. Please, Dr. Shiouh.
Thank you. Okay, where to go from here? Okay, Mars Golden Decade should not be seen as a mere sound bite or a pipe dream. However, all of these pillars are constituted terms which often result in fruitless debate about their meanings and where or not they are mutually exclusive. In policy making, they are also notoriously difficult to measure and operationalize. So we, at least, we suggest 3 questions, 3 challenges. Our first challenge is, could Mars Golden Decade reflect the value of Taiwanese people, and what is the vision of the Taiwanese society? Our second challenge is how to materialize the aforementioned public values when Taiwanese people highly distrust their government. Our third challenge is how to integrate these public values into policies in this polarizing society. If we do integrate these values into policies, what would our society look like? Could a competitive society be benevolent? Could an elitist society be democratic? Could a liberal society be equal? If we follow the job of integration, we will must promise then look like. Thank you for your listening. Thank you.
Okay, now we proceed to the discussion. And the first one we have welcome Professor. Yeah, okay.
Well, what should I tell you about Taiwan? You know everything about Taiwan. I only know things about Netherlands, you know. Who am I to tell you what to do? And that's what culture is all about. It's your culture, it's your choices, it's your values that count, not my values. The only thing I can say, I don't need 6 minutes, I need only 1 minute. You take my other minutes, okay, Wolfgang, that's good. I give you 2, then I give Wolfgang 4, okay? But only thing I can say is, it seems that you want it all. And you want it all simultaneously. And the only thing I can suggest is that you have to make choices. Either the one thing or the other thing. You cannot have it all at the same time. And you are dependent on economic circumstances. Like we are in Europe. That's something that goes for the whole world. The financial crisis hurts the whole world, and it will, I don't know, but it also hurts Taiwan as it hurts the Netherlands. You know, in that regard, we are very similar. And then you have to make choices. And to make choices means to emphasize one thing. To emphasize what you want to achieve. And the immediate implication of emphasizing one thing is that you neglect the other thing. And that means that if you neglect it too long, that it will become an urgent problem. If you neglect your culture, your traditional culture too long, it will be an urgent problem to address. If you neglect your economy, your employment, the wages of people, it will become an urgent problem. And that means you have to be flexible. But more I cannot say. You have to focus and be flexible. That's all I can say. I don't have any suggestion to make from our Western world, as arrogant as we mostly are. We do it like this in Holland, and you should do it the same way in Taiwan. That's crazy. That's crazy. I don't say that, and I don't want to say that. I want to give Wolfgang that opportunity to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vries. Okay, now we go to Professor Berman. Please.
That is so broad. I did not know what to think. And in this morning, we heard many definitions of it, from public value to build civil society all the way to environmental justice and restructuring and like so. There are many different ways to go with this. And generally speaking, we know from surveys, including from Taiwan civil servants, that civil servants are well aware of public values and are very capable of balancing public values with other values. There's a great awareness of that. You see that even in non-traditional public organizations like airports, airport authorities, school districts, economic development areas, those public managers often do not have even degrees in public administration, but people know public value and they're attracted to that job. So I don't think really that is the issue. Rather, I think it's something else. If I look at the 5 pillars of President Ma, I would say that these, from what I know, is that these probably do reflect the needs and desires of Taiwan people. Democracy tends to work that way. There may be some things that are left off for sure, but there is a certain congruence there. But it also shows the problem of democracy at large, in that Taiwan, as I tell my students at Tsunda, is not an island. Taiwan is not an island. It's very much part of the world and connected with the world, and the problems of the world we find here reflected in Taiwan as well. One of those problems is how to get these goals met in democracy. And there's no evidence that Taiwan is any better or worse than many other countries that I know of. The point where we're at now, I believe, in society, is this is a wonderful time to be alive and in public administration. We see growing capabilities that create a need for reforming democratic processes around the world. Michiel de Vries might complain that we don't know how to use civil society better. I would argue that 20 years ago, you did not have a civil society that government could use. You can complain about contracting out and privatization, but you can only complain about that because in this day and age, you have companies that can deliver. In Taiwan, you did not have that situation 30 years ago. So we have a growing capability. A part of new public management was introducing ICT. You did not have that problem 30 years ago, and it's brought enormous benefits. I have no doubt that we will find in all different countries ways to use our civil society better. That is a long-term area. Granted, in the short term, we have fiscal crisis, we have all kinds of crises. We will get through those, but it's a long term that we need. In the long term, all democracies have their problems. We heard from one discussant that you in fact, that you don't like politicians because they are so short-term oriented, and I agree with that. There's no difference between Taiwan politicians or American politicians or Brazilian politicians. So it's a systems issue. So I think the challenge that we have as a discussant is how to make our democracy better. All people like their freedom, we like democracy, but this system that was handed down from us to us, if you take the American model, it was developed by some farmers 200 years ago. There's no reason to believe that that system would fill our needs today, nor that that system necessarily works for America very well either. What we have is a devolution of capability in all countries. We have in civil society that can do more, but our civil servants can do more as well. And here is where I think we need to look at political institutions and rethink the job of politicians, appointed officials, and senior civil servants. Quite simply, every organization, especially also in the business sector, have a view of what strategic management should be at the top. President Ma's agenda is about strategic leadership for the future. That's not a 3-month agenda, it's a 5-year plan. Who is capable to deliver such a plan? It doesn't come from politicians anywhere in the world. The creation of the policies must rest with civil servants. But the way we divide in all countries, our top leadership is such that ministers, who are usually appointed officials, except in the Westminster system where they would be elected, are indeed short-term oriented. And they are expected to drive policy, especially in East Asia. And the senior civil servants in many countries do not act with strategic leadership as if they would have been in a private company. We don't have good data, it's hard to do, but a reasonable hypothesis is that many senior civil servants around the world, Taiwan, America, Chile, act more like middle managers than senior managers. They need to start acting with leadership. So I think leadership is an enormous topic. My own personal view would be that we need to appoint civil servants who can provide top leadership and let ministers act in a role of greater accountability exacting. The idea that ministers should be setting policy or could set policy in Taiwan's system does not make sense. Under your constitutional practice, you only allow 2 or 3 political appointees per ministry. It is not reasonable to assume that one minister of the Department of Transportation can set policy for all of the Department of Transportation. It's not reasonable to assume that your Minister of Health can create policy for all health issues. We need to, I think, seriously look into the leadership of senior managers in our agencies to deliver this agenda. So the third question was how to realize this agenda. And I think we do need to look at leadership and expect more from our civil servants than what I think we are currently getting. Thank you.
Next is Professor Drechsler, please.
Lots of things to strongly disagree with, so that would make for very, very interesting discussions. Maybe one of the things I will say is that I actually don't mind politicians. You know, it is a bit cheap to talk about democracy only in the old Churchillian terms, that it's the worst form of government except all others, but there is something about that. And what we need to realize, a point originally made by Berdyaev, is that democracy is a form of excellence that a form of government that forgoes excellence and forgoes a lot of very good things that could happen, and especially the imperial expertise of the senior civil servants, because there is a problem with power brokerage, with influence, and with eternally recurring nepotism. That means the idea of a meritocracy who with excellent leadership runs the country, and where the politicians are only, if you will, folkloristic disturbances, has not really worked out very well. In a way, I like it also, to have a, you know, a mandarinate that runs the country and politicians as breakfast directors who say hello and things like that. It just doesn't work either, and democracy is a conscious choice against that. Now, two things. Of course, I have nothing to say about public values in Taiwan either. That would be absurd. Just as Michael, I would say, you know, what could I say about that? But from the discussion of public management and values right now, I would like to take up indeed the paper we had in the beginning, and there are two things that I can and want to react to. The first is the term operationalization. The second is the term innovation, because both of them are really crucial for the current public management discourse. One of the remarks in this very nice paper that you gave was that one of the problems with values is that they are so difficult to operationalize. You can only also turn it around. Partially, we have a value discourse in public management because the entire operationalization discourse is already a problem. Operationalization means I can quantify anything. That, ladies and gentlemen, is an ideology. It's a faith. Nobody said that you can or have to quantify anything. All these indicators and structures and anything like that. Of course you can believe in that if you want, but you don't really have to. Partially we have the value discourse in public management because of the, in most countries, disastrous failure of the new public management practices, not theory, but practices. And that I say, and that we say this is not enough, and therefore we need another dimension. Another dimension that may not be quantifiable and that in the public sphere we need. You know, the English word that we use here, value, it comes from a Latin root that refers to health. It really means healthy in a certain way, but it's interesting how this word went into two ways. On the one hand, you have value in the sense of it's worth that much and it's very quantifiable. And the entire idea of values is to have a rich government. And on the other hand, you have values that are the opposite of that. Now here I can say something that is a bit contextual, if you will. In one of the great classics of government, and that is the Mencius book, Mencius in the very beginning, in the first story, 1A1, describes how, or here it is described, how he comes to the King Hui of Liang, and the king says to Mencius, well, since you have come so far here for the government advice, what can you tell me that is for the profit of my country? For which Mencius says, why do you talk about profit? Countries are not about profit. They are about what is decent and what is good and what is just. And remember, it is Lord Berlin, Isaiah Berlin, who has said that is the difference. You can quantify certain things and can't others. The financial things, you can quantify it. Trust, loyalty, faith, and so on, you can pseudo-quantify, but not really. You can make pseudo-psychological questionnaires, people answer to that, but that's not what it's really about. The values to be created, the soft values, also come with a danger. If we assume that certain values exist in a society, isn't it so that values are constantly negotiated and constantly changing? Who says what the values are? It's a very vague concept and one that can be really oppressive. Now, from the Western perspective, again, today is a very auspicious day to talk about values. Today is the 15th of October, and that is the birthday of the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, one of our great ones, who in state theory and economic theory is way more important than one thinks. And it is, of course, Nietzsche who has written an important book called The Revaluation of All Values, the point of which in the end is to say that values as they exist, outdated values, of which the principles are long forgotten, if you will, the dancing around the shadow of the dead god, are more oppressive than anything else. So to base anything on alleged values rather than on discourse and negotiation between, if you will, the civil society, is also coming with dangers attached. The final thing I want to say, I think I might already be in the minute from Michael here, I'm not sure, but one thing I'll still say, and that is this emphasis of innovation. One of the things that Michael mentioned is that people are a bit sick of the reform discourse. This is one of the reasons, but not the entire reason, why now everybody talks about innovative PA. Whereas those people who really deal with innovation theory tell you that there is no such thing as innovative PA, because what innovation is clear. There's a clear Schumpeterian definition of that. It's an industry and economics thing. And the question, or one of the biggest problems we are now having in public management is that everybody says we need to look innovative. But you don't need to look innovative in PA. You need to do it decently. The point in public management is to have an administrative structure that is supportive of genuine innovation. That means optimal public management structures for economic growth, not that seem innovative themselves. If you have reform agendas like that, I'm not saying you have, but this is the experience we have now globally. If the word innovation enters, it sometimes goes away from this path and people focus not on innovation-friendly public management, but on innovative-looking PM, which usually oscillates between the embarrassing and the ridiculous. So much I would say from my modest perspective. Thank you so much for your attention.
And listen to the presentation today. The topic you think was quite broad. But I just responding to that presentation. Probably I don't know much about Taiwanese politics and public administration. I need to study more. But I'm staying. But from my experience of Taiwan, I've been here for about 1.5 months as a Chao to Chengchi. And I think probably it will be not the choice of development strategy, probably, but a choice or nurturing of identity or state building in Fukuyama's sense, which is more important, I think. And having said that, I like to make 3 points that I intended to make about public values. One is public value has some contradictory meaning in itself. Public and value. We haven't talked about actually a value in public administration until maybe 1 or 2 decades ago. Value they talked about in the private sector. Public sector is rather the implementation of law. But we are beginning to talk about public value. And then we do NPM-based reforms. And then in the meantime, we lost some of the public in the public administration. So we have to actually have a good hint on the contradictory sense, which is really laden in public value. So we need some kind of contradiction management to probably further the notion of public value. Having said that, I think probably we need 2 things, 2 more points. One is maybe we are in need of a keen sense of public. I can draw on some examples of Korea. The current president, Lee Myung-fu administration, he started out with a huge margin of victory. But Xianzhai, his approval rating is sometimes below 20%, which is not really probably the lowest so far. But there are many reasons. But he made some, I think, some, probably not he, but his aide probably. The technicians from in public administration mostly, I suspect. Very critical errors. For example, in the first year, the administration decided to import American beef. What the heck, American beef? That's safe, right? But it actually created a huge civil resistance. Actually, it ended up with a civil protest. There, the plan to develop a 4 river channels got a big civil resistance. Even these days, they until just a few months ago, they talked about the privatization of some of the big public enterprises, like the management of Incheon International Airport, which is the largest international airport. Privatization of a bullet train corporation. And they were thinking about the corporatization of allowing the corporatization of hospitals. That created a huge noise in Korean society. Thinking about those issues, I'm developing one paper, drawing on the notion of so-called protected value. American beef is probably the public administrators, not some, virtually most of them, including me, it is safe. But it is within the zone of protected value of a lot of citizens. It is within the zone of protected value. If you somehow bother that protected value, even though it is technically correct, you have some problems. Not some, but huge problems. So unless you have, we probably are in need of training or nurturing, especially the senior civil servants, about their political sensitivity. Even though it is technically or administratively correct and feasible, there are some things that you don't want to push at the moment. And then I think the Lee Myung-bak, the administration, in their making of public policies, in some key areas, was too much dominated by some the public administrators with just some technical, maybe capability, without having that kind of a political sensitivity. And that created a huge problems in Korea. So we probably, because this is the era of civil participation, in and out of public administration, participation is a big issue. So I think especially for senior public administrators, nurturing a political sensitivity is very important. Also, it is very important for their capacity of solving problems, public problems. So I'm talking about different set of skill set for the senior public servants. So that is one lesson that the Korean government, probably I suspect, from my experience, Taiwanese government also in need of. The last point that I like to make is that we should not forget about the importance of value. Citizens are frustrated because public administration is too slow, not finished. The things are not finished on time. Sometimes it is too expensive, and also too complicated, too much red tape. So the creation of value is not wrong. It's NPM-based reform. A big chunk of it is correct. You should pursue it, but at the same time, you need some kind of contradiction management. One and very important element of the contradiction management is, I think, is a nurturing of maybe some political skill. There's a political in the sense of solving problems. You can think of politics as a way of hanging around with right people. That's not the politics that I'm talking about. So I'm serious about politics. It's a politics to solve problems, to create consensus, make decisions, and get it implemented. 谢谢。
I told Professor de Vries what a stimulating and provocative keynote address he gave earlier, and now I'd like to actually challenge him on 4 points that he made. This is in a very friendly and a very constructive way as a way forward. He mentioned that we should stop reforms and resurrect public values as the guiding stones of public administration. And somehow I doubt if we can stop reforms, because reforms don't begin inside of public administration. It's a groundswell of discontent from not just politicians, but from the citizens. And so these reforms often roll over public administration like a steamroller. So I somehow doubt that we can stop reforming. And that leads to the second point that he made. And I actually think he will probably agree with me on these points, so it's not really a matter of disagreement so much. But he did make the point that all reforms are bad. And somehow I doubt that too. I think that actually if we had reforms that could undo reforms, those would be good reforms. And so if we move toward those goals that he described, and most of what he said I agree with, about the need to manage toward public values and to take into account the common good and the public interest, reforms moving toward those goals would actually be good reforms. And I would be supportive of those and want to implement them as quickly as possible. A third point that he made, I think this is the most provocative point of all, is that he said he hates politicians and politics. And actually there are times when I feel the same way. Some politicians enunciate values and courses of action that I really disagree with. And I find myself not liking politicians. But I think it's really very important that public administration have a constructive relationship with politicians. We might redefine the problem, you know, not as one of hating politicians, but that perhaps politicians need to be more connected with public values. And perhaps there's even public education that needs to occur so that public values transform into those values that would support a public interest and a common good. If society is focused on self-interest and self-serving behavior, then those public values need to transform into something more positive and forward-looking for society. So I see the relationship between public administrators and politicians as a more constructive sort of relationship. I'm a public administration practitioner and also a public administration scholar, having worked on both sides of the street for almost 40 years now. And I know that we have similar people here and some people involved in one camp or the other. I think we are on the verge of what could be a tremendous leap forward in public administration. New public management has served a purpose in identifying the importance of efficiency and effectiveness. And it's brought about at least some effort to attain those goals. It's also served the purpose of showing us the ugly side of a public administration that only focuses on efficiency and effectiveness. It's highlighted the need for equity and justice and many other goals that constitute what we might call public service performance. And so it's served both positive and negative purposes, but on the whole, I think it's left us poised for a tremendous leap forward. In public administration research and among public service practitioners, I see a lot of activity around a half dozen different topics, and I'd like to just briefly sketch out what I think those topics are, and they will be very familiar. They're things that we've already heard discussed here. One is that reforms have really pervaded the world. I think every country has been affected by many of these reforms. There was some discussion about public values cannot be imposed from one society to another, but without a doubt, many of the influences, the reforms, have actually crossed national borders, and they've affected governments on every continent. The need, for example, to downsize and to be more efficient in the public sector. So these common denominators seem undeniable to me. Public values in public administration scholarship has two different meanings, and I think both of them are very important. A scholar at Harvard University, Mark Moore, described public values as what public administrators do when they innovate and find ways to deliver services that actually serve the public interest and the common good. Now, this is different from just innovation. Innovation might be finding better ways, but importantly, creating public values is connecting to the public interest and the common good and creating something that was not there before. And then public values serves a second purpose, or has a second definition, in that these values are the goals that public administrators should manage toward. If we talk about improving performance, then this is what defines performance. It's public values, the need to be more austere or more effective, or to be fairer and deliver more justice. And so in this hunt for public value, there are several things that seem important. It was mentioned earlier that the rule environment of public administration can serve as a serious constraint, and that if rules are more flexible, this allows administrators to innovate and create public value. We speak of dysfunctional rules as red tape. And so the removal of red tape is a high priority in governments all over the world today. Civic culture and social capital, other topics that have been very prominent so far this morning. And I think one of the most important things about this is that if the public has this civic culture, and if they create social capital where they intermingle and help government co-produce public services, this can actually make public administration far more efficient, and it can remove resistance to public laws and initiatives. Public service motivation. I've had the good fortune to be one of the key people in the development of this concept. It's the idea that I think people work for money and rewards, but in the public service, that is, all of us work for something even more than that, right? We want our rewards and we want our salaries, but we also work because we're mindful of the public interest, because we're concerned about the future of our country, because we want to see things done in a better and more sustainable way. This is public service motivation. It's really very important that we would try and inculcate this type of motivation in our public servants. Networks and networked governance. I think this is an implication of new public management. And what it means is that single organizations and single managers can no longer be held accountable for outcomes and results, because the ownership of public services in many cases has been transferred to the private sector. And services have been contracted. In the case of IT, for example, we may have private sector officials who come in and actually deliver IT services in government. So you see, it's really very hard to hold government officials accountable when the work's being done by a private organization. And what this means is that we now have networked governance. There are many people who converge together and deliver the key public services. And this raises some important accountability issues. And lastly, an emerging topic is leadership. That was mentioned as well. There's a sense that we need good leadership, but we don't know exactly what it is. And I think that this is a topic that will be developed and researched especially intensely over the next few years. So it's an exciting time, I believe, and again, I believe we're on the verge of a really important move forward. Thank you.
As I have listening the presentation, as as East Asian neighbors, I found very much similarity of the public values as Taiwanese government try to achieve. I think from East Asian region, I think you mentioned top 5 pillars, top 5 public values you have to try to achieve. It's quite identical within East Asian government, what East Asian each government try to achieve. For instance, for Japanese government, of course, that the top agenda is to revitalize the economy and how to harmonize with the environmental and social development. And you put the culture as the first pillars, and as I see here in Taiwan that I see a lot of Japanese animation and the cultures, and as Japanese government see as this kind of the Japanese pop modern culture is the important resource to export. And Korea again, and Korea, Korean government puts national competitive strategies and try to export these culture. You know, you see, we all love the Korean drama, soft drama. So that's, I think that the public values that each government try to achieve is getting similar and getting more identical. That is evidence that the economy, the economy, society, and culture is more and more globalized and more intertwined and more interconnected. So when the public values all we have to achieve is almost the same. The question is to how much extent we can achieve, and that is a question of the government capacity. That's why I think, as the Michael talked in the beginning, that the government bring the government back in is the key words. Now it's the question is the government capacity, since we all try to achieve the same goals, but the extent, how much extent we can achieve is really rely on the government capacity, especially not unlike the past in the NPM, maybe NPM, that the top public values, the only one public values is not to achieve the economic efficiency, how to harmonize economic efficiency and environment and social development. So that we cannot rely on, let's say, the environmental development to the free market principle. So there's much more room what can government can mobilize resources. And so that's why to mobilize resources, the question is the government capacity. And that's my observation. And as you see that Japan had experienced the huge earthquake last year, March 11th, and again that I see that the top 5 the pillars of the public values of Taiwanese government try to achieve is rather more like a political agenda, not the public values. The public values, maybe the public values is materialized through the election to the top, to the public political agenda, and through the government, the public values is delivered and realized and back to the public. That's kind of cycle, and what Japan has experienced is that what if such kind of public political or agenda set by the top elite contradict with what the public the needs. Is a contradiction between the political agenda and what the citizens needs. You see that after the March 11th, that we totally changed we see that we can observe that the fundamental change of the transformation of the public bodies, what the general citizens need or want to realize through the government's through the government. Let's say not the economy, but also now it's more safety or environmental free economic development. So now it's the transformation phase. Japan has experienced the transformation phase of the change, reorganize or redefine of the public values, what we have to achieve. That's I think that's is the challenge Japan is now facing, and I think the same as in Taiwan and I think that some other countries, same as in Taiwan, would as again that the political politicians and citizens when the public values the both sides, top elite, the politicians and the general citizens, the public values, what they want to achieve is different. Is how to integrate these differences. I think between the political elite and the general citizens, I think the government and the government officials, they have to do a lot to facilitate and to integrate. I think that's the new capacity that which Japanese, I think the most, not only the Japanese government but also this Japanese civil servant, we want to accumulate the new capacity, new dimension of the capacity as a facilitator to integrate the public values. And related to the public values, as I will present in this morning, in this afternoon session, that the public Japanese situation, just want to share with you the Japanese situation is trust in government, especially after the March 11th, has been quite changed due to I think due to the different response to the earthquake and the following nuclear crisis, and trust in central government has been on decline after the March 11th, while the trust in local government has been on increase, and still keep the higher trust that more and more local government can enjoy the higher trust in public trust, and that's the Japanese situation that I want to share with you, and I will explain you in details in the afternoon session. Thank you very much.
And now we turn to Professor Wu Guang. Okay, welcome, Professor Wu Guang.
I'm most honored to have this chance to be here to participate in this conference. And after all, previous excellent scholars have already discussed so many interesting ideas about the topics. I was thinking when I was sitting here, what's new I can say it about? After all their discussion and express their idea about this topic. Then I come up with something new. I can speak in Mandarin. So why don't I do that? I think that I'll better perform in that way. 所以我会用这个国语来跟各位讨论我在这一方面的想法。我觉得这个主题呢，对台湾来讲呢是具有非常深刻的一个意义啊。因为我觉得我记得呢。有一位政治学的大师，如果我没有记错的话，应该是 Laswell。他曾经界定什么叫做政治。他说 ：“What is politics? Politics is an authoritative allocation of value and interest。”他说是对于这个价值啊跟利益的威权式的配置啊。And therefore， 所以呢，这里面呢就一定会有赢家，也会有输家。当一个 choice， 当一个这个 value 被决定了以后啊，我们常常忘掉了说，这边就会有价值上面的赢家，这边也就会有价值上面的输家。那剩下来的问题就是说，输家为什么要认输啊？那我觉得现在在台湾的问题呢，就是其实我们对于什么样子的 public value 呢，应该是我们大家所共同接受的。 然后我们应该透过怎么样的一个程序啊，去把这个 public values 能够 identify 出来呢？其实大家并没有太多的共识啊。那主要的一个原因呢，我自己常常在想，有几个。第一个呢，就是我们在政治上面不同的力量之间呢，其实他们从 national identity 从国家的认同上面就有不同的意见。那因此呢，从这个 national identity 上面有不同的意见以后呢，其实可以把很多的 value 啊，根据这个 national identity 来，甚至于加以反转。我的意思是说，譬如说，杀人可能是错的，可是呢，如果你能够把对方界定成是你的敌人，那你杀越多敌人，你是越对，并且你是越英雄。哦，比如说贪钱可能是错的，可是如果你贪钱是为了要把它存在国外，当作是你将来建国的资本，那你就跟国父一样伟大了，对不对？以前国父孙中山先生也做这个事啊，他也募了很多的钱，然后存到国外啊。可是他要建立的就是民国嘛，好，所以换句话说 ，value 是什么呢？其实呢，会跟很多的这个过程啦，跟你的所谓的 national identity 呢的这个界定呢，会有非常深刻的关系。而台湾在这个问题上面呢，都没有得到完全的解决，也因此呢，所以什么是真正的 public values， 大家能够遵循的呢？其实啊，是充满了争论的。那我觉得这个呢，也是台湾现在呢，在政治啊，以及在公共行政上面碰到的很大的一个问题，就所有的这个公共政策的讨论，都会被无限的上纲，到最后就是到底你爱不爱台湾的问题。哦，那因此很多的这个问题呢，虽然我不完全这个赞成所谓的量化的这种公共政策的这种主张啊，但是呢，曾经有一句话叫做 "You can only manage what you can measure"。那当有很多，尤其是那些非常高层次的 value 的事情呢，当它很难被 measure 的时候呢，其实到底谁对谁错，谁应该是当作是赢家哈，谁应该是当作那个输家呢，就没有办法得到一个很清楚的一个解决。那也因为这样子呢，我觉得台湾在未来所需要最大的一个问题的解决呢，其实就是要能够有一套的程序，要有一套非常基本的共识，然后让大家能够在那个基础上面真正的去讨论我们的 public value 是什么，然后呢，才进一步呢去运用政治的力量以及用行政的力量呢，去追求我们那些公共的这些价值啊。那以目前的情况来讲啊，因为我的时间很短，我觉得在政治上面的力量不足以帮助我们做这个事，在媒体的这个结构上面呢，也对这个讨论是非常不利的。那同时呢，我们的学界在这一方面也并没有太多的 independent 的这个力量跟声音呢，来帮助这个社会啊，来建立这一套的所谓的 public values。所以我觉得这个就是台湾的问题。那我希望呢，将来我们还有机会能够共同的努力。谢谢。
就像刚刚Dr. Brewer 讲的哈，他有说，这个 public value approach 其实是哈佛大学 Kennedy School 的一个 Dr. Moore 哈，他所提倡出来的一个东西。那我可以看到今天刚刚许立教授他们3个人所做的这个马政府的这个黄金10年的东西，其实 follow 那个 framework 在讲，所以我就想要让大家来看一下这个 framework。下一章哈，那基本上这个 public value approach 哈，它那个 Dr. Moore 就举出一个很简单的一个 strategic triangle。那在这个 triangle 里面哈，就是有3个要素。第一个要素呢，在下面的右边的 creating value， 就是我们认为说政府部门的所作所为都要能够帮人民、帮他的 client create value。好，那另外第2个是一个，譬如说上面那个是 authorizing environment， 必须呢，为了要达到这些 public value 的一个 realization fulfillment， 我们必须从外在的这个环境里面获得。就是所谓的授权，就是必须赢得外在环境的这个信任，才会有合法性。我们去做这些作为才会有合法性，这是第2个要素。那第3个要素就在另外一边 operational capacity， 就组织的内在、公部门内在必须是要有能量的哈。那下一页呢，我们可以看到的就是说，看起来好像很简单，可是其实后面充满了一些挑战，充满一个挑战。第一个，比如说 public value 哈，刚刚我想是那个 Wolfgang 有讲到嘛，说到底什么是 public value 哈？这个 public value 是常常会改变的。那这一段话，我上面写的这一段话是这个 Kennedy School Dr. Moore 他自己写的，在他书里面写，他是说这个问题就是说我们在问什么叫做公共价值的时候，最重要的问题是我们其实不晓得它是什么。即使我们今天可以 sure 说这就是这个，可能明天就又换了，因为时过境迁，人们的需求是不一样。到底我们真正要什么？所以我们很清楚的，前面的学者们都有提到说，其实这么多的，像马总统提出这么多，马团队提出这么多的黄金10年，不同的东西太多了。所以我们 keynote speaker 有讲说，你要舍的割舍，可能要至少弄一个优先顺序嘛。未来10年哪个先哪个后，还有怎么去 measure 它们，其实都是很重要的一些问题。这里面充满了不要说充满了，有一些它会彼此 conflicting。譬如说你要经济发展，跟要建立一个永续的环境，常常我们就会发现有2派人马，环保人士跟经济发展人士在那边吵个不停。那到底怎么样去？这个 challenge 就是怎么样去 strike a balance？ 到底这个价值跟那价值，如果彼此冲突的时候，我们要多少？彼此怎么去分配它？哪个优哪个先，哪个后？其实都是蛮大的一个问题。那在台湾，我觉得就像刚刚吴老师讲的，我们可能需要就是大家有更理性思辨的一个环境，更多的资讯和更多的教育。现在，譬如说我们在学校教书，看到小朋友们跟年轻人的，看到 Facebook 只要有人转载一则什么东西，就对，大家马上跟着转载没有细究后面的真正的资讯的正确与否，或后面可能产生的一些问题。我觉得我们是要透过教育来建立一个所谓的 civil society， 这也是我们 keynote speaker 一直讲说，我们要 get civil society involved。那我觉得这里是非常非常重要的。我们习惯了exchanges of our ideas， 我们的 opinions， 然后最后才能够有一个共识。那在下一页呢，我们看到的就是第2个 authorizing environment， 这里面基本上就是要向外面的环境，包括我们的 civic society， 或是说 mass media， 我觉得媒体我们要向他们负责external accountability。那我觉得这里台湾最大的问题是，我们的媒体环境其实不太健全。大家都觉得台湾的媒体是乱源。马团队当然目前的 approval rate 这么的低，他自己是就是说这个团队要负蛮大的责任。可是另外媒体也脱不了关系，天天在那边炒作这个报恶不报善这样的一个情形，唯恐天下不乱的一个情形，其实是让我们觉得不晓得怎么样。你要赢得 environment 的 trust 就格外的困难，这个团队赢得那个 trust 格外的困难。然后我们常常说，团队说要做人民有感的事情，要让人民有感受，能感动。人民怎么样会有感呢？你发现常常就是媒体报得好的，人民就有感；媒体常报道，你就有感；媒体不报道，我们就常常没感。所以换句话说，我要讲的是，媒体的健全是蛮重要的。如果我们要这些好的 public value 能够 realize， 但是这个我其实是不知道该怎么去做，毕竟不在这个领域。那最后一个，在这个组织内部的能量这个方面，去 operational 的能量方面当然也是内部要有个好的内控制度。内部组织的 manpower， 它的预算、它的 management， 包括它跟外面怎么做一些结合，其实都算。那我觉得台湾比较大的问题就是，刚刚 keynote speaker 有讲过说，在世界各国很多的公部门的士气都是慢慢的在低落，因为媒体的报道基本上好像不太能够很有成就感的为大家来做事。那这里面我是觉得台湾的文官有一点不够积极，但是我是很同情他们的，因为你如果积极，你如果 innovative， 你很可能就被检调查了，然后呢就被上诉了。虽然过了5年，过了10年，无罪，对不对？但是其实中间你不能升迁，你中间就是有很多很多的麻烦，所以久而久之，其实公务人员明哲保身这个不敢追求风险，这是可想而知监察院曾经在去年还是做了一个研究， 调查贪渎，台湾的公务人员的贪渎之后，最后定验率被起诉的最后定验率就40%几哎，那其他50%几人真的都很可怜很冤枉。我觉得我们检调体系怎么样在这方面提供做一些改革，提供公务人员也可以一个安心，可以积极往前冲。好，这样的一个环境，我觉得是非常重要的。好，那我想就是很简单的做出我一些个人不成熟的意见，请大家指导，谢谢。
What I'll talk about is which I called accountability with the election. It's a term I coined to conceptualize what I have observed in China during the past 10 years. I actually recently, today the framework today what I talk is will come out in a book called New Things in China. This is the book is edited by Mark Lano. I think he's a director of the European Union's Foreign Affairs Centers. Some of you maybe know. In 2008, he published a very popular book about China study. It's called What Does China Think? In this book, he is seek to summarize how Chinese politicians and intellectuals are seeking maybe a new path of development models in mainland China. Actually, Mark Lano and his team, they summarize my former publications since 2009. He has a team work for him. They summarize my main idea and then send me and say its title is this. So I talk. So I think it's I will first. I think no matter where we live, I think citizens want the government accountable to us. But I think the most challenging issue is how to to ensure the government or the officials are really accountable to us. I find it's in order to ensure the accountability, there are two fundamental issues. The first is who will use the power, and the second, and there is a question of how the power exercised. Otherwise, in other words, this is a related issue is how to control the use of the power, control use of power, and I find. Based on my, although I have done some historical comparative study in one paper, but today I'll focus on China. What I have observed happening in China, China remains a long electoral regime, despite the past 30 years state transformation. But accountability has increasingly become an urgent issue in China, and the mainland Chinese citizens are increasingly impatient about the way the government uses their power. So I try to use this metaphor to summarize my main ideas. I use the metaphor of actors play on the platform. Election can be viewed as a way to choose or change the actors who will play in the platforms. If we cannot change actors through an election, that's the case in mainland China. We can lavishly change the procedural rules with which the government or the official must comply in playing the games. In this way, we can make them to a certain extent more accountable to the peoples. And here, in this case, I think the evolution of the so-called budgeting democracy play an important role in China during the past 10 years. And further, I think the people, as the audience, have begun to keep a critical watch on the player, the actors, their place in the platform, although we cannot change the actors, even we don't like them. So in this case, I think during the past 10 years, there is in China we observe the rise of the social accountability in China. Okay, the first is the evolution of the budget democracy in China. This mainly related to the evolution of the budget oversight of the People's Congress, our legislature system. If I have time, this afternoon I will report the development in this respect based on our recent nationwide survey. The second is the second form is the emergence of the social accountability. Since the economic reform, we saw actually there is not only the fundamental change in economy, but also in the society. The society actually has becoming more and more autonomous. So in this case, as a result, the society has become a powerful sources in controlling the exercise of the power by the government and its officials. In a paper published this year in the Australian Journal of Public Administration, I summarized the major patterns of the social accountability emergent in mainland China during the past 10 years. The one form is I call the state-led social accountability. This is driven by the state's effort to rebuild the legitimacy of the rule of the state. And the second form is the society-led or initiated social accountability. Most of them are the second forms. In these cases, the society, citizens, and the civil organizations and the medias, they will expose the wrongdoing of the government and officials and organize to force the government to change their policies and so on. Okay, so there is a great implication for the mainland China's political development. There does exist the possibility of a route of I call accountability without election. I will not argue. I'm not arguing that the election is not important or and unnecessary. I just say there is a different sequence in accountability building or political development. Of course, there is limitation because those accountability building effort have been undertaken in a context without the electoral democracies. So it's a whole limitation. That's why I report criticize, but low misunderstanding, because recently I have been criticized by a lot of my colleagues. They say, you oppose electoral democracy. I say, no, I never said electoral democracy is unnecessary in China. And I will never say this. I just say there is a different sequence. Okay, thanks.
According to my doctor, I cannot speak too much because of my vocal cord problem. So I asked Professor Liao to help me share my thoughts with you. I apologize for any inconvenience caused on my part. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, though I cannot actually participate in this important discussion due to my vocal cord problem, I asked Prof. Liao to help me share my thoughts with you. I apologize for any inconveniences caused on my part. Besides that, I would like to thank you all for listening. I think we all agree that there is no more important topic in public administration and policy than public values. In a recent online survey, I invited leading e-governance scholars and practitioners in the field to identify significant future e-governance research topics. Among the 22 research topics in 7 areas, the topics they emphasize most are all highly related to public values. For example, to establish performance indicators that are result-oriented and aligned with public values, to implement e-government performance systems and utilize performance information to continuously improve e-government policies, to establish e-governance mechanisms that help create and adhere public values such as transparency and accountability, to increase online citizen participation and improve democratic governance, and to apply information and communication technologies to address national emergency management and the various challenges of aging society. In my field of research, public values of information technology, in particular e-government, often can be categorized into 3 types. Public values in the first type are operational values, such as efficiency and effectiveness. In the second type are political values, which mean achieving public entities' missions and the goals as defined in terms of political agendas and guidelines, such as transparency and participation. In the third type are social values, which mean values occurring to society as a whole, such as sustainability and the regime stability. Our government now focuses too much on the operational values and has no clear and consistent policies to achieve political values, not to mention the social values at all. The problem needs to be addressed and resolved. Second, public values, political legitimacy, and the responsible government are mutually reinforcing. Public administration scholars have raised several important questions regarding this issue. One is, if public value conflict, for example, openness may enhance as well as endanger the rule of law and effectiveness. How to balance these values? I believe that the issue we are talking about today. Our government should all know they can't please everyone. However, they try to do everything and please everyone. But unfortunately, they fail to do so. There are many challenges to resolve conflicting public values. I believe citizen participation and the cross-sector collaboration are still the main keys. Political deliberation and the public discourse not only point the way to public values, but also contribute directly to them. The more effectively the political systems representative institutions work to connect citizens and the various groups meaningfully to the world of politics, the more optimistic they are likely to be about the prospects for collective social efforts. Here, I would like to emphasize the words effectively and meaningfully. For the case of the third and the fourth stage of Central Taiwan Science Park, we can tell that our government fails to balance public values meaningfully and effectively. The conflict resolution requires negotiation and compromise among all parties. Personally, I like the phrase, more tolerance towards difference, mentioned in Professor Shiouh, Huang, and Liao's slides. I think that's what is missing in our society now. Finally, I would too add one more. That is persistency and the perseverance overcome the greatest difficulties. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Professor Zhu. Thank you.
So I get the last word, which is a lot of pressure here. Firstly, I'd like to thank National Open University and everybody who's been extremely warm and hospitable. This is my first time to Taiwan, and I must say I've really enjoyed my time so far, and I hope I can come back to this wonderful country. I apologize, I do not have a PowerPoint, but my observations or points I make will be based off on the keynote speech and all the discussions I've been hearing so far. So I've been taking a lot of notes as everybody's been speaking. So I'll try to restrict it to maybe 3 points that I think are important. The first point that Professor De Vries made about reforms and the negative consequences of reforms. Reforms are not bad. I think reforms are needed, but the challenge is how are the reforms implemented? And I think that's something that wasn't alluded to in this panel, and I think implementation is a key. We can have wonderful reforms on paper, which might look excellent. They can be running from 50 to 1,000 pages. So it satisfies a lot of people, so that's all great. But I think the key lies in implementing those reforms, and I'll take it a step further, that I think evaluation of those reforms is going to be important too, to make changes, because one thing we know that is constant in this world is change. So evaluation and implementation, I think, are going to be very, very important. The second point that I'm going to make about is public, putting public back in public administration. And several of you have alluded to this, but I think, when trust is broken, it's a challenge. Because one thing I think I agree is citizens around the world, whether it's China, it's Taiwan, whether it's India, whether it's United States, they all expect something from the government. You want public security, you want clean water, you want air, clean air. So there are these basic needs that the citizens expect out of the government, wherever in this world you are. So putting the citizens back into public administration is very important. And I can speak from an Indian perspective too, because I do some research in that region as well. In India, a poor farmer is least interested which paradigm we are using, whether it's new public management, is it new public administration, is it new public service, is it scientific management? I mean, this is we scholars constantly evolve these terms, or is it just for scholarship's sake? The poor farmer is really concerned, where will I get my electricity from? Where will I get water from? Can I take my kids to school? Those are basic necessities that person is really concerned with. And I think we really need to bridge that gap. It's wonderful to have these paradigms. It's wonderful to have all these different various reforms and the terms we give to it. But I think that putting public back, putting citizens back is very important. And that's where some of you refer to the grassroots movements. And I think that's going to be key, especially in developing economies, or especially in economies also where trust in government is lost. As an example I can give, the Right to Information Act, which was passed in India in 2005, it was really a grassroots initiative. And so I see the role of grassroots really becoming more and more important in some of these democracies. And the third point I'd like to make about values. The question I ask is whose values and what values are we talking about? So whose values? Is it the private sector? Is it the citizens? Is it the employees, employers, the unions, media, interest groups, and so on? So whose values dictate what happens, how policies are passed? We see that in the US all the time. Currently, healthcare is a very contentious topic there. So who's going to prevail? Whose value is going to prevail? Is it the private sector? Is it the interest group? So that's something that I think we need to ask. And the second point is, what values are we talking about? Several of you have alluded to that as well. Accountability, effectiveness, efficiency, representativeness. So these are all competing values, or are they competing values? Is one value more important than the other? I think that we need to ask ourselves. So it seems to me, with these 3 points that I make, it seems to me that after every 10 or 20 years, we as public administration scholars start to question the field and say, are we in a crisis mode? Do we need a new paradigm? Do we need a new lens to look at these issues? And that's good, because that keeps our job as scholars going. So that's wonderful. I have nothing against that. But I think, again, putting public back into the whole scenario, I think is going to be very crucial, and bridging that gap. Implementation, evaluation, those are going to be key issues that we have to address. So again, thanks a lot for this wonderful, warm, and hospitable environment here. I've really enjoyed myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vries. Very, very inspiring insight from that.